Welcome back to Spring Into Math 5. This is Mr. Stein, and today we're talking about data analysis. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about data before. We're just going to kind of jump back in and review some different charts. All right, so tables and graphs are ways to organize and present information so that they can be easily interpreted, or viewed. Now, a table is a set of data arranged in rows and columns. Graphs are created to show the relationship between two variables from the data in a table. All right, now, a bar graph is a graph that uses columns to show the comparison of quantities or amounts. All right, so you can see here we have a bar graph of the average price of gasoline by state. So you have, obviously, Hawaii is the most expensive, and you can see on the left you have the average price. On the bottom you have the state, so you can see the different spread of different states. So you can see in California, based on this chart, we're one of the more expensive ones. Missouri is the least expensive. So, charts or bar graphs rather like this are good ways to visually display data quickly. All right, now we have 7th graders' favorite activities. So again, you have the number of students on the left, and you have favorite activity on the bottom. So you can see that, no surprise that the number of students surveyed here, the bar graph shows that watching TV was the most popular activity with 9 respondents. Reading was next, followed by sports and exercising, and then hanging out with friends and babysitting. Now, my personal opinion of observing 7th graders is I think hanging out with friends would be a little higher than reading, but I could be wrong. Now, this table depicts the recommended the recommended number of hours of sleep people need by age. So you can see here in this table we have the age group on one side and the recommended hours on the other. So we have infants from age 0 to 1 are recommended to get 15 hours of sleep a night. Then children 2 to 5 are 13, children 6 to 11 are 11 hours, teens are 9, and adults are 8. So now let's create a bar graph using the information from this data table. All right, so to create a bar graph, so I want you guys to try to do this with me. So take a moment. If you need to pause, get some graph paper, let's make this. So the first thing is we're going to draw an X and a vertical Y axis. So we had a horizontal X and a vertical Y. Okay, second, since the graph is about sleep, we can give the graph a title. We're going to title this one Sweet Dreams. Obviously, if it was about sleep, you could title it Sleep Needed. It wouldn't really matter in terms of what you title it. I think creative titles kind of give it a little more pop. The third is we're going to label the horizontal axis with the age. So under the x-axis, you're going to write age. And then on the step 4, we're going to label the vertical axis the hours of sleep. So on the y-axis, on the left, I turn my paper around and write it up the other side where it says hours of sleep. So the age group's on the bottom and the hours of sleep going up the y-axis. All right, and the fifth thing is we're going to look at the range in data and decide how many units on the vertical axis, the y, should be labeled. So in this case, the label of vertical axis should be 0 to 16. And I think we should go by 2s just because 16 is an even number and give us a nice even spread throughout. Okay. All right, now the 6th thing we need to do. For each age group on the horizontal or the x-axis, we need to draw a vertical column to the appropriate value. So for example, for infants, we're going to draw this vertical column to 15 hours. Okay, so I'm going to slide back and want you guys to write down the different times. So take a moment, jot down, infants 15 hours, children 13 hours, or 2 to 5, children 6 to 11, 11 hours, teens 9, and adults 8. All right, so pause me if you need to, write those down, and then we'll continue on. Okay, so you can see here mine, and like I was talking about, we have our x-axis here, so we have our age group, and you can see I went infants to adults. And then on the other side on the y-axis, so if I label it y, you see the recommended hours of sleep going up the vertical side, and you can see that I labeled it by 2s. And so since infants 0 to 1 need 15 hours, I just go right in the middle. And you can see that basically all of them are in the middle, but you still get a real good range. I think even though they're in the middle, it's still better to go, by 2s. It gives you a nice spread. All right, and one thing visually that's helpful, guys, is you don't want to do them real small and crunched. You want to make sure it's big enough. You want to use up your space pretty well so that it's visually appealing. It's not a very good looking bar graph, and it's a lot harder to read if it's very small. Okay, so let's take a look at another one. So the students in Mr. Stein's class have continued to learn about the Iditarod. Now, after learning some of the basics about the distances covered, the students began to research information about the teams, where they come from, and how many teams have entered the race in the past few years. So, I asked them to create either a bar graph or a line graph of the data that they discovered. All right, so we have two students here. We have Tommy and Keith. They decided to investigate where the mushers, the people that are, kind of the drivers of the sleds, come from. Now, they'd used some research on the computer and discovered that in 2010, that there were 71 mushers who entered the race. So they came from several different states and countries. So Tommy and Keith organized their data like this. Okay, so we had 46 mushers from Alaska, no surprise, that's where it is. 13 mushers from other US states, and 12 mushers from other countries. So we just kind of lumped all the rest in the others. And sometimes you're going to want to do this because you don't want to have 15 or 16 different bars and a lot of them being one. This is now, of course, how they chose to do it. Obviously, could be different ways. All right, so now they need to put their data into either a bar graph or a line graph. All right, so the first one is a representation in a bar graph. So you can see here Alaska had the 46, and they chose to go by fives because of the numbers. And sometimes you can see that that's a challenge. You can see that it might be hard to figure out it was exactly 41 if you don't have little ticks. So if I were doing it, in graph paper, I might have gone by twos if I had room. Obviously on a chart like this, you wouldn't. You can see the other US states. You can see that it's in between 10 and 15, looks like 14, and then a tick down is the other countries. Okay, so a line graph is a series of connected points that display data or information that changes over time. So the line graph below, or on the next slide rather, illustrates the change in temperature over the first 7 days in February in Boston. All right, so what's nice about a line graph, whereas a bar graph you can see, like in that last slide when we were talking about the mushers, Alaska was just a disproportionate amount of the mushers came from Alaska. It was just obvious how many more came based on the bars. So when you're looking at a line graph, you're looking at kind of a spread of how something changes over time. So a line graph is used to show change over time. You wouldn't use a line graph to show that other research where you're talking about how many people come from a different country. It would just be be up and down. It wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't tell you anything about how many people came. So you can look at this and you can really see that from February 1st to the 7th, it got a little warmer, it dipped back down, and it kind of went back up. So a line graph is a good tool to show change over time. Okay, so we've mostly focused on bar graphs, a little bit of line graphs. I hope that kind of gives you a good semblance to help you do your work in a little bit. See you next time.